Paul Dysinger. He has been interested in gardening his whole life and enjoys his family's small-scale farm that grows over 70 varieties of vegetables, herbs, and berries all year round. He currently lives off-grid with his wife Natasha, and they enjoy educating people how to grow their own nutrient-dense food from their backyard. Friends, get ready to learn how to grow your own nutrient-dense foods in your backyard.
Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart feel lonely and long for heaven and home? For Jesus is my portion, a constant friend is He. For His eyes on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. His eyes on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. And I know He watches me. And I know He watches me.
Hello everyone, I'm Paul Dysinger, and it is a real privilege to be able to share with you today. We're going to be talking about the 4-step garden plan to grow an abundance of vegetables in your garden. But just before we get into that, if you wouldn't mind bowing your heads with me for one more quick word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we beg that your Spirit would be with us as we talk about growing our own food. You know, you placed man in a garden at the very beginning of time, and I just pray that you would fill this presentation with your Spirit, that it would be a blessing, and that you would be here among us, even though we are spread out, we're connecting over the internet, that you would be in each one of our homes and each one of our hearts as we gather together through this means. In Jesus' name, amen. So it was a few weeks ago, and a quick little story before we jump into the meat of our content, and we've got a lot that we're going to be going over today, so I hope that you have a pen and paper or something to take notes. But quick little story, it was a few weeks ago, and I was just putting my son Ethan down for a nap, and he's just over 1 year old, and he had just gone down to sleep, and I hear my wife calling from out in the other part of the house, and she's like, "Hey, oh, come out here." So I come out and I look outside the windows, and the wind is just blowing furiously. And I was like, man, what in the world? Where did this come from? And I can tell that it's picking up. You look across the way and you can just see the trees like blowing down. And so I said, Natasha was like, is this safe? Should we go? I said, well, let me check the weather real quick, because usually we get weather notifications, right? So I grab my phone out, I go over, we have cell service, and I'm trying to log on to my weather app, and I can't even connect. The storm has gotten so bad that the cell service is down. I can't connect to the internet. We don't know what's happening. This came completely out of the blue. It was a sunny day before, and just completely out of the blue, the wind keeps picking up, and suddenly I hear just this crashing and banging against the side of our little cabin. And literally there are branches from the woods that's, you know, maybe, I don't know, 50, 70 feet away from our house, just slamming into the side of our house, straight line winds. And Natasha asked me again, should we be getting out of here? And I said, yeah, I think we should. Let's go. Because we don't have like a storm shelter or something in our little cabin there. So I run into the bedroom. Actually, Natasha runs to the bedroom, grabs Ethan. I grab a few things, and we head out the door, and by then the rain starts to come down. So we run to the car, and you know, as we're running to the car, it was really amazing. Through this whole experience, God really gave me a lot of peace. At the same time, as I'm running to the car, I'm like, man, we could be, you know, hit by a flying limb or a falling tree or something. So we jump into the car and we head down our driveway. And as we head down the driveway, the rain just hits like heavy, really strong. You can hardly even see. And we come down our driveway, we turn onto the road. We're going up to my parents' house because they have a basement that is like built into the hillside, so it's much safer area. So we're driving, and there's like this limb that has fallen down over the road. We kind of have to go around it. We go down, we pull into my parents' driveway, and by then, like I said, the rain is just coming down harder and harder. We can barely see in front of us, and I'm zooming because it's like, let's get there fast, right? And all of a sudden, Natasha's like, wait, stop. And I just barely see through the rain this huge tree that had fallen straight across the driveway. So we're like, oh man. So we pull off the driveway, pull around, and we were able to circumvent the tree, get back on the driveway, got up to my parents' house, and got to their basement, a place of safety in this storm that had completely come out of nowhere. Like literally, my uncle was out on the tractor, I believe, jumped off, went inside, left the tractor in the middle of the field. You know, when Natasha first called me to come out of the bedroom, you know, I was looking up on my phone the weather, and a little bit later, I looked out the window, and literally our whole hoop house, which is where we grow a lot of our food, the plastic had just stripped. It was like completely stripped right off of it. And later we went down and looked at it, and it actually torn a whole metal purlin off the side of the hoop house, blown the whole metal purlin, plastic, and everything clear off of the hoop house. Literally a storm that came out of nowhere. And you know what, friends? Right now, there are storms in life that are coming out of nowhere like that. This storm reminded me of what's happening in our world today. And nobody has to tell you. I don't have to tell you that things are going crazy in our world today, right? We live in that experience. And it reminded me, frankly, of how fast and furious the whole coronavirus pandemic hit our world completely unprepared. Because here we were, completely unprepared. We had no notification that the storm was coming. It hit like within minutes, and our world changed. Our hoop house was blown apart, trees were down. Literally, actually, it knocked out the power grid in our area for several days. We had to go rush by a generator to keep our freezer going and stuff like that. So, but the question is, are we prepared for the storms that are coming, right? Are we prepared for that is going to happen? It just happened with this whole pandemic, right? Nobody saw it coming, but it came, and our whole world has changed. And it reminds me of where Jesus says in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 7 and 8, it says, "Nation is going to rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines, pestilences, earthquakes in diverse places. All of these things are the beginning of sorrows, or the beginning of birth pains." And when a woman goes through labor, those contractions begin a little bit further spaced apart, not as strong, but as the labor progresses, the contractions get harder, they get closer together. And friends, I firmly believe that what we are seeing today is those labor pains getting stronger and harder. I feel like in my own lifetime, I can look back and see that these events that are happening in our world, earthquakes, famines, tsunamis, are getting closer together. They're getting stronger, and they're becoming more on a global scale. And I believe we're going to see that happening. As this pandemic may be, things are starting to return a little bit back to normal. Now is not the time. And I'm not here to hype everyone up or to get everyone afraid about what's going on, right? But I think that we should be wise and understanding of the times that we live in. And this pandemic, though things may be returning back to normal as much as possible, right? And it may, fade away. I truly believe that there is going to be something else that comes after this. And these birth pains are going to get stronger and more intense as time goes on. And the question for you and I is, are we prepared? Are we prepared spiritually? Absolutely. That is crucial because I believe that Jesus is coming soon. But then also the question, and what we're going to be talking about a little bit today, are we prepared physically as well to be able to be a light and a blessing to our communities and our families? And part of that is growing our own food. We are told that those in the end times that have land with space to grow are going to be like kings and queens. And I feel like I've experienced that personally to a certain degree, even in this pandemic, because we've had our land, we've had our food. We haven't been personally affected by the pandemic nearly as much as many people in cities. And so the question is, when do you start growing your garden? When do you start creating that garden and start growing your own food? And my friends, I truly believe that there's no better time than now. If you have not already started gardening or have been gardening, and even if you are a gardener, like a lifetime avid gardener, there's no better time than now to focus back in on it and help encourage other people. So today we are going to be talking about what I call a 4-step or 4-stage garden plan to grow an abundance of veggies. And this isn't, what I'm talking about is not just about self-preservation and growing my own food and making sure that I have enough to eat and survive or whatever, right? Because things may get so bad that your neighbors come and steal your produce. You don't have control over the weather. There's things that are out of our control, but there's things that we can do to plant our own food, to grow our own food. As much as possible. We pray over it. We do our best, and with the blessing of God, hopefully that food that you grow is not only a blessing to yourself, but can be a blessing to your community and to your neighbors when they need it most. And what a beautiful and powerful witness that would be, right? So, without too much more, let's jump in and talk about this 4-step garden plan, because, like I said, we have a lot that we are going to be covering today, and I want to make sure that we can get through it. So I'm going to pull up some slides here, And you ready? Let's go. I hope, like I said, I hope you have the pen and paper. Take some notes along as we go here. So, our 4-step garden plan. And first of all, just a very little brief background story of who I am. Like I said, my name is Paul Dysinger, and here's a picture of my dad, Edwin. We work together teaching thousands of people around the world how to grow their own food. And frankly, I grew up in the garden, basically. At least I should say my mom, my family has always had a garden wherever we went. My mom is an avid gardener. She's the kind that would take compost with her on her carry-ons, traveling by airplane, because I grew up overseas. My parents were missionaries overseas. So here's some pictures in Tanzania of our garden when I was just a kid. And then later, as I grew up, my father ended up partnering with his brother, John, so Edwin and John, on Bountiful Blessings Farm in Middle Tennessee. It's a beautiful farm in the rolling hills of Tennessee. And for many years, I worked with the family farm, where we grew over 50 to 70 varieties of different vegetables, herbs, and berries all year round. So spring, summer, fall, winter. In fact, for a while, we really specialized in the winter. Here's a picture of our winter harvest. I believe that was in January. You can see a little dusting of snow there. And then after several years of working with the family business, I branched off, started my own business called Born to Grow. And now, today, I work with my dad, Edwin. Here's my mom and Jennifer in the picture. And we teach thousands of people around the world how to grow their own food. And a little while after I began this business, I married the most wonderful woman in the whole world, Natasha Dysinger. It is such an honor to be married to her, and she has just come on, and I think she's even more excited about the garden than I am now, and we just love sharing our experience with other people. And just over a year ago, we had our first little boy, Ethan, and you guessed it, he likes the garden too. In fact, this is his favorite spot from this spring. We had a bumper crop of strawberries, so there he is munching on a strawberry with his cousin Patrick. And here's just a few pictures from our garden, just to give you a flavor, just to let you see, we come from this as people in the trenches. We're out there growing our own food ourselves, and hopefully, trying to pass on that knowledge to help other people grow their own food as well. So these are some pictures from last year. I should have had some from our garden this year, but these are from last year. Really, ultimately, what gives us the most joy, what gives me the most joy, is when I hear back from people like you that take some of this training, put it to practice. And Roy Kim here says there was a very noticeable difference in the amount of fruitage this year compared to last year. Really got to give credit where credit is due. So I thank God, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the masses. And really, ultimately, the credit goes to God. He's the one that created nature. We simply try to pass on those principles to you. Jennifer Lingerfeld here says that within a few days after side dressing her eggplants, that she was having some flea beetle problems. They had put on many blossoms. There weren't hardly any flea beetles left. Many healthy, looking leaves, looking good. So that is what really fires me up, and what I get excited about is when I hear from you. And so my goal is to give you some very practical, hands-on information that you can go put to use in your garden. Whether you're a beginner garden that never grown a garden before, or even if you're intermediate, even if you're advanced, hopefully some of the tools, the tricks, the tips, the knowledge and experience that we pull from can be a blessing to you. That is my hope, that is my desire, and that you'll be able to go away and implement some of these and see a result in your garden. So let's talk about this 4-step garden plan. And just before we go through the 4 steps, I want to do a little big picture overview with you and ask you the question, what is your dream goal for growing a garden? Like, what's your purpose? Are you wanting to grow a large garden? Do you grow your own food? Are you wanting to grow a market garden? How big do you want to do it? What's your dream goal? What would you like? Because that all plays into your garden game plan. And what I want to share with you here in these 4 steps, these 4 stages, is really a framework to build up to your dream goal. You may not get your dream goal this year, right? But you want to build up to your dream goal. And ultimately, whatever stage you're at, I would love for you to be able to go away from here being able to grow an abundance of food. So, talking about the big picture, just before we go into all the the how-tos and the interesting parts of your garden and planning your garden and executing it, from a big picture perspective, I wanted to just begin here with talking about our approach to gardening in general. And we really take an organic approach to gardening. That's a very natural approach. We want to work with nature as much as possible. I believe that God created nature. He was the one that spoke the trees and flowers and grass into existence, and all the intricate relationships between them into existence. And I believe He did it very intentionally. And so the more that we can work with the principles and the systems that God already created in nature, the better and the easier it will be to grow your own food rather than fighting against them. So let's work with nature, not against it. And part of that has to do with understanding ecosystems. And so one focus that we have in the garden is that we really try to encourage biodiversity in our gardens. We try to encourage healthy bugs, and a diverse amount of bugs. Don't try and kill every single bug that you see. There's beneficial bugs. Sure, there are negative bugs. We'll talk about a little bit about how to deal with those in a bit here as well. But encourage biodiversity, encourage life in your garden, and it will make a big difference in your garden. So that's just our big picture approach to the garden. That's kind of from the perspective that we're coming from. When it comes to your dream, here's what I encourage you to do. Number one, I encourage you to break it down and take it one step at a time, because oftentimes we'll have these beautiful, wonderful visions, dreams, of what we want to do in our gardens, and it can be easy for our garden to overwhelm us, for the garden to become your master. You want to be the master of your garden. You don't want your garden to be your slave master, right? So I really encourage people, especially if you're starting out, if you're a beginner gardener, start out small. It may not be your dream garden, but start out small, master it, learn it, and then expand. And you'll have a much more fulfilling, much more satisfying experience that way. Take it one step at a time. And that's what we're going to do in this presentation here. We're going to be taking your garden one step at a time and breaking it down into 4 stages. And so just focus on one stage at a time, and it will make a big difference. And if you're an intermediate or advanced gardener, it just helps with clarifying things, bringing things into perspective. And again, it's hard to keep your mind on a million different things. Let's take it one stage at a time, and you'll be much more successful. So let's talk about your garden game plan. This is what I call the 4 stages. I call it your garden game plan. Stage 1 I call ignition, and this is kind of themed around a rocket taking off. It's kind of cool that SpaceX just sent their recent rocket, the first American launch back into space since what was it, 2011? That was super exciting. Did you all see that? It was really cool. Anyways, this is kind of I love space. My wife loves space. This is kind of built around that rocket scenario. So ignition, that's like your foundation of your garden. Then you have launch. That's when your rocket is just like taking off. It's just leaving the ground. Your garden is just starting out. It's growing. Then you have grow. That's like this ride into space. This is as your plants are growing, and you're harvesting and you're caring for them and you're watering them. And then the 4th stage here is extend, and that's specifically for those of you that may want to extend your harvest earlier in the spring, later in the fall, or even grow straight through the winter. Okay, so that's kind of a higher level part of gardening. So I would encourage you, first of all, if you're a new gardener, just to focus on the ignition, launch, and grow, just through the main harvest season. But then if you want to take it to the next level, you can learn to extend your harvest and grow into the winter. So we're going to take these steps, these 4 stages, one stage at a time, and give you the framework for your garden. This is what you can be focusing on one stage at a time, right? And then also, with this framework, it will just bring a little bit more clarity into your garden planning, and we'll be talking about specific tips along the way of the different sections within each stage. So stage 1 is ignition, and this includes planning your garden. ordering seeds and specifically focusing on your soil and soil nutrients in your garden. It's really setting that foundation for your garden. You know, you've got your rocket on the launch pad, you're filling it up with fuel, you're getting everything ready for ignition to ignite and get going. So when it comes to the garden, I highly encourage you to plan your garden ahead of time. It makes such a huge difference when it comes to implementing your garden. Otherwise, you'll just go through the season kind of flying by the seat of your pants, and it could be a lot more stressful, a lot more overwhelming. So this is frankly where I think that most people struggle, and we've got a little tip here of how not to fall into the same trap, because it really is simple, but it does take some thought and some action, right? So success versus failure. Frankly, our lives are busy, right? I'm guessing that your life is busy, because my life is really, really busy, and most people that I talk to, their lives are very, very busy with work, with school, with family. We've got a lot that crowds into our days, right? And there's a big trap, and that big trap is procrastination. Because of the noise in our lives with everything else that's going on, the garden kind of oftentimes gets pushed to the side, and we just procrastinate. We're like, okay, no, I'm just gonna do that later because I don't have time to think about it right now, right? And so we delay, we procrastinate, we delay, and sometimes it's just so overwhelming that our brain freezes and we don't know where to start, right? So hopefully we can give you some tips here of knowing where to start and take that step by step. So how do you not fall into the same trap? Well, the first thing is to take it one step at a time. Don't just, it can be overwhelming when you've got to think about, what am I going to plant? How am I going to plant it? When am I going to plant it? What seeds, what variety should I order? When I order it, do I put it in a plug tray? Do I plant it directly into the garden? Do I use soil blocks? And then once I put it into the garden, how do I water it? How do I keep it weeded? There's a lot that goes into it. Take it one step at a time. It will make it a lot less overwhelming, and it will help you out along the way. And then what I really encourage you to do is set aside time in your day or in your week to plan your garden. So whether it's just 10 minutes a day or an hour a week, just set aside time, put it into your calendar, because if you don't, it will get crowded out, right? And also, I really highly encourage you to start planning early. I recognize that here we are already kind of in the gardening season, so here's the good news. Right now, you can start planning for a fall garden, and you actually would be probably planning early for a fall garden. It depends where you live. Some places you already need to be planting for a fall garden right now, but if you start planning early, it will help you a lot with that overwhelm. And if you really want to, you can run out and get accountability with your family, with your friends, say, hey, keep me on track. I really want to grow my own food this year, but I tend to procrastinate, so help me out, right? All right, so what about making your plan? Everything revolves around your garden plan. Like I said earlier, I really want you to be the master of your garden. Don't let your garden master you. So here's the steps that I would encourage you to specifically focus on if you've got your pen and paper taking notes with making your garden plan. There's three main things. You want to focus on what to grow. That means choosing the vegetables that you want to grow. And literally one day, I would encourage you just one day to sit down and write a list. I want to grow tomatoes, radishes, green beans, peppers, eggplant. Just write down the list of the veggies you want to grow, right? Then, once you have that list, then you do need to figure out where you're going to grow it. So map out your garden space in your backyard, wherever you're at, and choose where you're going to grow it. And then number 3 is choose when to grow it. And that one can be a little bit more tricky for a lot of people. There are tools online. Actually, we have created a click and drop gardening calendar that makes it really easy to plan your garden. Feel free to email me if you're interested in that. Or at the end, I'll share our website here where you can go, borntogrow.net. But you want to find out when that crop that you want to grow grows best, because there are crops that grow in the winter better and there are crops that grow in the summer better. We call them cool weather and warm weather crops, right? So we don't have time to go into depth with all of the differences between them, but you do want to figure out when to grow it and put it into a calendar. So actually put it in the dates that you want to seed them. And if you plan your season out ahead of time, putting it all into a calendar, then as you go through the year, you'll just know what you need to do every week, right? And it makes it a lot easier to grow your garden. And then, so those are the three main things. Choose what to grow, where you're going to grow it in your garden area, and when to grow it. Make your gardening calendar, your plan. And then, of course, you have to go through the process of actually picking the varieties and ordering the seeds, which takes us into a question that a lot of people have. What about the different types of seeds? You've got GMO seeds, hybrid seeds, open pollinated seeds, and heirloom seeds. So let's just go through a few definitions real here. I'll try and clear this up for you and help you as you go through the process of picking your seeds. These definitions are from Johnny Seeds here. And the big one that everyone wants to know, right, is GMO. What are GMO seeds? Are they good? Are they bad? Frankly, I would say stay away from GMO. And the honest truth is that really when you go to a seed store, you basically can't buy GMO seeds because GMO seeds are patented, and so they actually have to have a contract between the farmer and the company like Monsanto to grow those seeds, and then they have to be licensed to grow them because it's a patented seed. So you can't just go buy GMO seeds, right? And what genetically modified seeds are is they literally modify, re-engineer the gene of that seed. So it's a mechanical or biological transfer of genetic material outside natural methods between genera, families, or kingdoms, right? So it's like an extreme of this is taking a gene from fish and inserting it into a tomato gene. Fish and tomatoes they don't crossbreed. They don't, right? They're completely different families, right? Kingdoms even, right? So GMOs are out. And like I said, basically you can't just go out and buy GMO seeds either. So that's good news. Now, you do want to work with seed companies that do their best to not have their crops cross-pollinated with GMO seeds, right? Because cross-pollination can occur. The second type of seeds here is hybrids, and these are the offspring of a cross between two or more varieties, usually of the same species, right? So think about it this way. When you're breeding dogs, if you breed a poodle with a golden retriever, you get a golden doodle, right? It's like a mix. It's a hybrid of the two. It's a perfectly natural way that species breed. And in a way, all of us are hybrids, And so in the gardening world, people do this on purpose. So they'll take a disease-resistant tomato and they'll cross-pollinate it with a tomato that's really big and juicy and beefy, and they'll create a hybrid that grows really big, juicy, beefy tomatoes that are also disease-resistant, right? So they're cross-pollinating these varieties, but it is a perfectly natural thing that happens in nature all the time. Open pollinated is a non-hybrid variety, and the key here is that it can reproduce of itself in kind. So what happens with a hybrid is if you want to save the seeds from a hybrid crop, you can save the seed and you can grow it, but it will most likely go back to one of the parent varieties or be most similar to one of the parent varieties. So it's not going to reproduce true to its type. Same with dog breeds, by the way. You take a golden doodle and you breed it with another golden doodle, and some of the babies are going to look more like a golden retriever, and some of them are going to look more like a poodle, right? So, breeding dogs, you have to purify that breed by extensive breeding until it's pure, where it will reproduce, pure to its kind. It's the same here in nature with the garden. So you've got your tomatoes. A hybrid is not going to reproduce true to its kind over and over and over again. Open pollinated has been breeded down to the level where it reproduces true to its kind, and an heirloom is the same as an open pollinated. It's just an old variety that owes its present availability to the seed-saving efforts of and matures. All heirlooms are open pollinated. So those are the different types of seeds. And then, of course, I would encourage you to buy organic seed when you purchase seeds. So thoughts to consider: GMO seeds don't have a track record yet. Really, there's serious health and environmental concerns that continue to mount about them. Like I said, you're not going to be able to just go and buy them, so that's good news. Hybrid seeds are not evil. Some people confuse them with GMOs. We're all hybrids in a sense, so we grow hybrids, definitely. It's just that hybrids they're not good for seed saving. Hybrid seeds can have added vigor, uniformity, and disease resistance just because of how they are, what do you call it? How they're crossbred, right? But then hybrid seeds will not reproduce true to type, like I said. So if you're wanting to save seeds, then you'll want to go with open pollinated varieties. And there's actually evidence, I guess, that the nutritional content may be a little superior in open pollinated varieties. I'm not sure. So take that with a grain of salt. You can go research it yourself. And so if you want to save your own seeds, like I said, use open pollinated seeds, which include hybrid seeds. And scrap this last this last bullet here. It says saving seed can be difficult and complicated. Really, it's not that complicated. So I just want to point that out. I should have edited this slide before giving this presentation here. But I would encourage you to get a good book to guide you. And there's a book called Seed to Seed that is a good book on saving seeds. So that's an excellent thing. Next question is, where do I purchase my seeds? So I'm going to give you a list of seed companies that we recommend here and that we have purchased from ourselves. First one here is Johnny's Selected Seeds. You have High Mowing Seeds. Now the neat thing about High Mowing Seeds is that they are 100% organic. Every seed that they sell is organic. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a mixture of organic and non-organic seed, and they have them labeled in there so you know which ones you are getting. Then you have Baker's Creek Heirloom Seeds, and with them, all of their seeds are heirloom seeds. So that's neat because you can know what you're getting there. Southern Exposure is another great place that you can. I think they especially have oftentimes seeds. If you live in the South, they have, or especially the Southeast, I believe, they have seeds that are often disease resistant to common diseases in the Southeast. And then Seeds of Change is another seed company, and Territorial Seeds. So go ahead and write these seeds down. We may even be able to make these slides available for download for you all so you can have this slide at your reference. But these are excellent seed companies that we would encourage anyone to do business with and to order seeds. Seeds are very important when it comes to your garden. You know, you have to have good soil. That's one foundation. But the other pillar in the garden is you have to have good seeds. You know, if you got bad seeds, they're not going to do anything. You're not going to grow anything. So highly encourage you to get from reputable seed companies. And when you are looking for seed companies, this is something that I believe all of the previous ones have taken, that look for what's called the Safe Seed Pledge. And it's basically a pledge that they will not sell genetically modified seeds. That's kind of the short of it. It says the mechanical transfer of genetic material outside of natural reproductive methods and between genera, families, or kingdoms poses great biological risks as well as economic, political, and cultural threats. We feel that genetically engineered varieties have been insufficiently tested prior to public release, etc., etc. So they clearly state that they're going to stay away from genetically modified seeds as far as possible. So that's what you should look for in seed company, that they take the Safe Seed Pledge. All right, so that is, planning your garden and seeds and ordering seeds and where you order seeds. The next part of this ignition is focusing on your soil, because this is the other foundational element. Soil is so important for growing a healthy garden. Your soil basically is the health of your garden. And the question comes up, do you get a soil test? Or should you get a soil test? And so here's my take on this. I would encourage everyone to get a soil test. If at all possible, it's beneficial to get a soil test. Now, soil tests, they are done, there's no standard procedure. They're done in different ways in different laboratories, so you'll get different results. And, they come back and they've got all these specific numbers, like 4.725, parts per million of, whatever nutrient. Just for your reference, those numbers are general ballparks. It comes back, looks super detailed, but it's a general ballpark of your soil. So it will help you generally know if your soil is high in nitrogen, if it's really low in phosphorus, and you may need to add a more natural source of phosphorus in your soil. You can look at the base and micronutrients of your soil, and it'll help you know how to help balance out the nutrient level in your soil. So I would encourage getting a soil test, and the company we encourage using is Peaceful Farm and Garden. Peaceful Valley Farm and Garden Supply. That's what it is. I knew it was like Valley in there somewhere. Peaceful Valley Farm and Garden Supply. Their website is Grow Organic, and they have a good soil test. And one of the reasons why I encourage them is they come at it through an organic perspective, and so they actually give you tips on how to analyze your soil tests. They actually give you like a step-by-step PDF walkthrough that walks you through understanding your soil test, and then organic solutions to build up your soil and the nutrients in your soil in a natural, organic way. Now, aside from the specific nutrients in your soil, because you have nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and then you have micronutrients as well, right? Aside from that, one of the best and most beneficial things that you can do to practically any soil, wherever your soil is at, is to add organic matter to that soil. And oftentimes that is done by adding good quality organic compost. So whether that is a mushroom compost or worm castings, actually are a great source of organic matter as well. It may be compost from your kitchen scraps. It could be composted leaves. Whatever it is, it's often called a leaf mold. It's composted leaves. Whatever it is, adding that organic matter will help balance your soil. It will help the soil structure. It'll help it create a more crumbly, if you had the ideal soil in your mind, it would be kind of like a crumbly chocolate cake. It has like crumbles and aggregates, so it lets water, it lets air down into the soil. And so if you have a soil that's full of clay, it's real hard and compact, organic matter will help loosen it up. If you have a sandy soil that just the nutrients drain out of it real quickly, organic matter helps hold your nutrients in that soil and helps that soil hold water as well. So it helps to balance your soil wherever your soil is at, adding organic matter. So that's something that we focus on, that we push people to do, and that we encourage you to do. Now, if you do not get a soil test, and you decide not to because it's just too overwhelming, I totally get it. I encourage you to start gardening whether you get a soil test or not. And if you don't get a soil test, then number one, focus on adding organic matter. And then number two, you can get a balanced overall nutrient mix that you could use for your garden, at least just to start out. I wouldn't use it on an extended period of time because you can end up having an imbalance of nutrients over time, but it's something that could get you started out. And this is our number one garden fertilizer that I recommend, and that is Down to Earth Vegan Mix. It's a fairly balanced nutrient mix that is all natural. In a bit here, I'll have a slide, I believe, that lists the ingredients in it. And we've just had really good success with it. It's a vegan mix, as you can see, and the reason for that is not because I don't believe in using any animal products. I believe the natural, the natural cycles of nature include animal manures and stuff like that, right? But the key here is that a lot of nutrient mixes come with like blood meal or feather meal in them as nitrogen sources, and often times that's sourced from CAFOs, which are those large centralized animal feeding lots, and you just don't know what those animals are pumped up with, the immunizations, the antibiotics, everything, and I don't trust it. I don't want to support them for one thing, but I don't want necessarily to have those other things entering my garden either. So this is a great alternative. It's a all natural plant and rock based nutrient mix that you can use in your garden. Okay, so that is stage one in your garden. Stage two is launch, and this is where you are. So stage one, just a quick recap, is you're focusing on planting your garden, getting your seeds, and focused on building up the health of your soil. Stage two is launch. You're preparing your garden beds, and this continues building up the health of your soil because as you prepare your garden beds, you're going to be adding those amendments, the compost, etc., and then seeding your garden, actually planting your seeds, and transplanting, if you planted them inside, transplanting them out into your garden. So There are many different ways that you can set up your garden. And some people use the square foot gardening method. That's definitely a viable option. In fact, the way we do it is similar to square foot gardening method, but what we suggest growing in is 30-inch wide beds in your garden. You can see that in the picture here. It's a 30-inch wide bed, and there's a little pathway on either side. You can see the crops in the bed are planted like in blocks. They're in rows, but they're staggered rows, so when they grow large, they shade out all of the weeds underneath them. And actually, when you grow in a bed, you can fit more in that bed than if you just grew in rows, because sometimes people will encourage you to grow your garden in rows that are like 18, 30 inches apart, but you can actually possibly grow more for your garden space if you grow them in a bed. So here's some advantages of 30-inch wide beds. The one neat thing about them is that they're easy to step across, they're easy to straddle, they're not too wide, so you can easily step across them and reach across them for planting and harvesting. There's also many quality tools that are designed for them, which can be real beneficial, and our plant spacing recommendations are based on it. So, got a little personal plug there, but that can be helpful when spacing out your plants. Also, if you're growing in a home garden size, a 20-foot length is really ideal for a home-sized garden, because if you are getting amendments and amending your soil, trying to improve your soil, oftentimes those suggestions will come by putting so many pounds of that amendment per 100 square feet. And a 28-foot length is 50 square feet, or 1/5 of 100 linear feet. Or if it's given by 100 square feet, you'll know that's half of half of that 100 square feet. If it's given in 100 linear feet, then I would just do 1/5 of the 100 linear feet. So beds are not to be walked on. And this is like a cardinal rule in our gardens. We never walk on our beds. We want to keep the soil loose where they grow. And actually, when preparing the beds, we loosen up the soil with a spading fork or a broad fork, which is a larger fork that loosens the soil. We don't flip it around. We just loosen it. And then we always walk in the pathways and keep that soil loose where we are planting the plants. And here is an example of this 30-inch wide bed with a walkway in between. And this is what I call our superfood garden plan. Actually, you could go use this. You could go plant this in your garden as different superfoods. And here we often set them up 30 inches wide for the bed, and then 1-foot walkways in between. That's actually a pretty small walkway. So if you have enough space, you may want to do like 1.5-foot walkways in between. Like 18 inches is probably a little bit easier to work around. All right, so we have setting up and preparing your garden beds. Secondly, we're talking about building up your soil. So this kind of crosses over between stage 1 and stage 2. You want to build up your organic matter, and that can be by composting. I wish we have time, but we don't have time to go specifically into composting and how to compost in this session together. But once again, as you prepare your garden beds, you want to be adding that organic matter into your garden via compost or worm castings. If you have really clay soil, you may want to add a lot of peat moss in. It's just it doesn't have as much nutrients, but it just adds a lot of body into your soil. And let's see here. And then building up your soil, also that's a time when you'd be adding nutrient fertilizers into your garden bed. So how this ties into stage 2 here is what we do is we add that compost and those nutrients every time that we harvest a plant, take it out, and are ready to put in a new plant. So what happens is, let's say we harvest all of the lettuce out of a bed. We will prepare that garden bed again. We'll loosen up the soil. We'll sprinkle some compost over the bed, and if we are amending the bed with nutrients, that's when we'd put those nutrients on the bed as well. And then we scratch those nutrients and the compost into the top few inches of the soil. And then we rake it out smooth and we plant our next crop of veggies in. We don't amend with nutrients every single time, but we do usually put compost on every single time. So we may amend the bed once for 1 or 2 years, based off of our soil test. But then every time between plants, unless we notice something is, if we notice that there's too much nitrogen, and you can tell by the way the plants are growing, if they're super, super leafy and not putting on enough fruit, etc. Every time between plantings of crops, we'll put on some compost usually. And here is a little soil composition chart just to give you an idea of an ideal soil. Most people, when they think of soil, we mostly think of like the minerals, right? The rock, you've got these different rocks in your soil, rock powders, etc. And you may think of the organic matter, but what we may often don't think about is that a healthy soil is 25% water and 25% air. So you have a lot of air and a lot of water getting down into your soil as well. So you want that crumbly soil structure. And believe it or not, there is a huge amount of life in the soil. If I were to count in a teaspoon of soil, there is literally billions of little microorganisms. And that's a hard number to put your mind around. So if you counted 1 per second, like 1, 2, 3, and you're looking at it through a microscope and counting the microorganisms, it would take like around 30 years to count just the microorganisms in a teaspoon. I want you to look at your hand and think of a teaspoon of soil. 30 something years, or the late 20s, like 28 to 30 years, something like that. If you were to count all of the microorganisms in a gallon of soil, a bucket of soil, it would take like 31,000 years. So that's a lot of microorganisms, a lot of life in the soil. You really want to encourage that life, encourage microorganisms. They form symbiotic relationships with your plants. They help your plants be healthier and help them be more resistant to diseases and to pests and help make nutrients available to plants. So they're super, super critical. All right, we're running out of time, so we got to move quickly here. Seeding and transplanting. When you are seeding your plants, there's 3 main things to pay attention to. Your seeds need moisture, they need light, and they need warmth as they are growing. Germination does best around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. With some seeds, you can germinate them at lower temperatures, but that's just a general ballpark. As a general planting rule, you want to cover your seeds 3 or 4 times the diameter of the plant. So a 1/4 inch, like a pea seed that's about a 1/4 inch wide, you want to plant it about 1 inch deep. And in cool or heavy soils, you want to plant a little shallower. In warm or dry soils, plant a little deeper. Really, I wouldn't worry about that on a home scale. Just keep that general planting rule in mind. And then you want to keep the soil moist until germination. Now, there are many advantages to transplanting and not just planting directly out into the garden. There's some crops that we plant directly out into the garden, like carrots and radishes, and sometimes beets. There's crops that you grow really thickly, that it's just more economical. It makes sense to plant them directly into the garden. Many crops we transplant, probably 80%, maybe even 90% of the crops we grow, we transplant because transplanting is more reliable. You can take care of the plant better. It's a little bit more cost efficient as you're growing it. You have an almost sure harvest with that crop because once you transplant it into the garden, it's already 2 weeks old or whatever. It's got a head start. It's way easier to deal with the weeds when you transplant because they have a head start on the weeds as well. It increases the effectiveness of succession planting. That's when you plant multiple plantings of lettuce throughout your year, so you have multiple harvests of lettuce or whatever it might be. And growing them under shelter gives those plants a head start by the time that you plant them out into your garden. So what we like to use is what is called a soil block when we're starting our starts. Oftentimes people will start starts in plug trays. That's kind of a standard thing. We use a soil block maker. You can get these online, and they come in different sizes. They come in like really small. The ideal ones that we would encourage a home gardener would be to get 1.5 inch soil blocks or 2 inch soil blocks. You can get smaller soil blockers than are seen in the picture here. For a home size, they're not too expensive. And it makes little blocks of soil that you can grow your starts in. There's even a really big one, 4 inch blocker. And here is what our soil block recipe that we use for creating soil blocks. we have on the slide here, you've got the full recipe, half recipe, quarter recipe. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to go through it really quickly, and hopefully we'll be able to make these slides available for you to download so you can come back and look at this and use it. So you have peat moss. The two main ingredients here are peat moss and compost. Actually, there's 3, but those are equal parts peat moss and compost. I'll use the half-gallon section right in the middle here. So 3 gallons of peat moss, 3 gallons of compost, 1 gallon of perlite. It's those white granules that you'll see in potting mixes. It helps hold water and mostly helps hold water, maybe give some little airspace as well. And then 1 cup of a fertilizer mix. And note that 2-gallon buckets work really well for measuring, so you can find them at your local hardware store oftentimes. For the fertilizer mix, like remember here, I've got peat moss, compost, and perlite. Those are the 3 main ingredients. And then you got this fertilizer mix, which is kind of a separate thing. For the fertilizer mix, once again, I would suggest using the down-to-earth vegan mix. It's organic, OMRI listed, 100% plant-based, excellent balance of nutrients. Here's the nutrients in it: soybean meal, canola meal, alfalfa meal, rock phosphate, langbeinite, green sand, kelp meal, and humic acids. Really great fertilizer mix that you can use. So that's not the only recipe. There's other mixes that work well as well, but you want to mix the dry ingredients all together and then moisten the mix down with water at approximate ratio of 1 part water to 3 parts mix. It's better for your soil block mix to be a little bit more wet than dry, and you can use this same mix. If you're growing in plug trays, you can use this same mix. It's just a potting mix to grow your starts in. Then once it's mixed together with water, you want it to be moist like a wrung out sponge. So you don't want it to be sopping wet, but not too dry. So you want it moist, kind of like a wrung out sponge. And then to use the soil blocker, you'll just push the blocker quickly down into the mix with a twisting motion. You scrape off any excess. You kind of mash it down into it. Because it has peat moss in there, it will keep its body. It won't compact too hard. And you scrape off any excess from the bottom, and then you eject the blocks into a tray. And you may want to rinse the soil blocker in between making the blocks. Definitely at the end you want to wash it. You don't have to rinse it between every single use, but you definitely want to wash it off between the main uses. All right, so that is stage 2. That's like getting your garden launched, starting your starts, planting them out. Stage 3 is grow, and here's where a lot happens in the garden, right? You're watering your plants, you're weeding them, you're trellising them, pest and disease control. It's the care of those plants once they have launched, once they have started growing, and then all the way through to harvesting your plants and storing them. Way too much for us to be able to cover all of these during this time, but I want to give you some tips that could be helpful for you. So here's a watering tip. Number 1 is water in the morning or in the early afternoon. And one of the reasons for that is that it's nice if your plants can dry out before they go through the night. We don't like being wet and cold, and plants don't like being wet and cold. It usually cools down at night. So water in the morning so that it can dry out. People say, how much? Well, check the soil and see if it's moist, right? So watch for if your plants are wilting. If they're wilting, it's usually because they don't have enough water or they have too much water. So you can just put your finger down in the soil, see if it's moist, and that's a great way to just test and see if your plants need water. Here's a quick little weeding tip. How to eliminate 70% of weeds before you can even see them. What we do is we use what's called cultivating instead of weeding. Cultivate, don't weed. And this is where you wait for your seeds to just barely sprout. When they just put out that little white thread of a root, and they, sometimes haven't even put their leaves out or just start to put their leaves out. They're at their most vulnerable stage then. So if you come along, we use what's called a collinear hoe or a stirrup hoe, and you just mix the top of the soil. You want to do it when your garden looks nice, because those weeds haven't actually grown really yet. But you just skim the top of your soil when the weeds are just germinating, and it will kill and knock out like 70% of the weeds literally before you can even see them. So it's like sweeping your garden. So you just come out there, do it every week, and you will never really have a problem with weeds in your garden. It's really awesome. So you can see in the picture here, the key here is you got to do it when you don't think you need a weed. You got to do it when your garden looks nice like this. So go out there, skim the top, and that will help you out a lot. All right, some tips on pest and disease control. Number one here is you want to focus on the health of your plant. Focus on the soil. Focus on building up a healthy plant. It's like our bodies. You focus on the health of your body, and it will, you'll be more resistant to pests and diseases that come and attack your body. Healthy plants are resistant to insect pests and diseases. It's pretty phenomenal in nature. So there are natural solutions. Like if you have a pest problem right now, here's what I encourage you to do. It's what I call our now formula. Number one, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek here, is nuke them. Get rid of the pest that's there. Let's say you have aphids. You can kill the aphids that are on the plant, but don't stop there. That's where a lot of people stop. Don't stop there. Next, you want to organically fertilize that plant. Boost that plant's immune system, and then make sure to water it well. Make sure it has the nutrients and the water that will help boost its immune system, boost the health of that plant. Here's an example with some collards, I believe, that had some aphids, and this is a literal picture of it on the left. These plants were so far gone, my wife was like, you're almost crazy to try and save them, right? But I thought, I'm going to give them a chance. So I took some soapy water and sprayed the aphids, and that killed the aphids right there. You can get insecticidal soaps that are organic. And I just used some kitchen soap in this particular scenario. Then you want to fertilize. In this case, I used a liquid fertilizer called BioThrive. Right now, I would use the down-to-earth vegan mix and just scratch it around the plant. And then you want to water it well. And believe it or not, this is those same plants. I believe this is the exact same plant. If not, it was, there were several of these plants, and they all looked, really bad. And 21 days later, this is what it looked like, before and after. So you can, and this is what I want you to experience in your garden, to go from plants that are just, dying to thriving. Here's another before and after picture, some eggplants that were being riddled by flea beetles. This one, we fertilized and water. I don't think we even sprayed the flea beetles with insecticidal soap or anything. I think we just fertilized and watered, and this was the before and after of that exact same plant. So remember that formula, the now formula. Find a way to deal with the insect in a natural organic way, then organically fertilize it and water your plant well. Stage 4 is the last stage. It's more high level, and unfortunately we don't have a lot of time to really go into this today, but this is where you extend your growing season. It's protecting your veggies, growing them in the winter, extending earlier in the spring or later into the fall. And what I would encourage you to do is, if you want to extend your garden, one of the most simple ways to protect your veggies in the winter is to use a lightweight fabric cover that's called a row cover. You can spread it over your veggies like a blanket, and there's some benefits. Row cover is really lightweight. It's easy to manage, to spread out over your plants. It allows light to pass through to your plants. They are breathable, so it allows air to pass through it, and they protect your plants from the wind, which is super critical in the winter. They also increase the temperature just a little bit where your plants are. So the key here with the row cover is you want to keep it up off of your plants. You don't want it just right on your plants for most of the plants you grow. So you can use these little wire hoops like you see in the picture here, or another way is to build what we call a quick hoop, which is like a miniature hoop house. And here is how you build a quick hoop. There, you use 10-foot long, half-inch PVC electrical conduit pipe. You want to make sure it's gray electrical conduit pipe, or you can use the metal conduit pipe. And you bend it over, you put some rebar in the ground, you bend it over and slide it onto the rebar, and it creates a hoop that you can then put that row cover over and sandbag it down on the edge. And it can be very effective for helping extend your garden for a very cost-effective, it's not going to break your pocketbook like other solutions could. And you can have a winter harvest. We have members that have used quick hoops and have harvest in December or straight through the winter. So that's something that can be easy. If you want to take it to the next level, you can go up to using high tunnels, caterpillar tunnels. Caterpillar tunnel is like a really big quick hoop. And then the next level above that is to use a hoop house or a greenhouse, which the difference between a hoop house and a greenhouse is simply a technical one. Hoop houses are unheated, while greenhouses usually have some source of heat. in them. And really, most of the whole USA, you can grow straight through the winter just using a hoop house and row covers. So I would encourage you to start out with that. You don't have to go for a heated greenhouse and tons of expense, etc. So I know, friends, that's we've been going through a lot of information here. It's hard to put everything into an hour, and really we can't fit everything into an hour. But hopefully through the information that we've been able to share and we've been able to talk about, you can take some of these tools and go practically implement them in your garden and grow an abundance this year. Once again, I would encourage you, follow the game plan. Follow these 4 stages: ignition, launch, grow, extend. And let it help you create a framework for your garden so that you can focus on one step at a time instead of getting overwhelmed with the whole process. And with the right system in place, you can grow an abundance of food with a lot less effort, a lot less disease, less work, less stress, and less overwhelm when you have the right system, the right tools, and the right knowledge in place. But the key is having that system in the system and having that system in place. If any of you would like more information and more garden training, feel free to visit our website, borntogrow.net. You can jump on our email list. We send out free garden training. We have other more in-depth paid trainings as well. And feel free to email me with questions about any of those. I just want to jump on here again. And as we wrap up, just once again encourage you, as we look around the world, there's a lot that's happening. Like the story at the beginning, there are storms that are coming that we do not know yet will come. And they may hit fast and they may hit unexpectedly. And once again, I'm not here to build up hype or to build up fear over the current situation or future situations. But I would encourage you at the same time that now is the time to act wisely. There's no better time than now to begin putting in a garden. Plants don't grow overnight. And listen, now is a great time to plan and prepare for a fall garden to be able to grow, in the fall and perhaps even through this winter if you use one of these quick hoops that we just talked about here, or a hoop house or a greenhouse. Now is the time to start. There's no better time to start. If you start in the future or you put it off into the future over and over and over, eventually a storm may hit that may just be devastating. And as we recognize the times that we are living in, I encourage you and I appeal to you to take note, to be wise, and to put your hands into the soil and to grow an abundance of food for your family. But more than that, it's not about self-focus. It's not about preserving ourselves. There is an aspect of, when we provide the food and the nutrients that we need ourselves, it enables us to be able to continue to be a blessing to others. If we die, then we no longer are a blessing. Now, ultimately, we place our hands in the will of God, our lives in the will of God, right? So sometimes, through death, He is glorified. Sometimes through life, He is glorified. But if we do everything possible to keep ourselves healthy, as we are, talking about through this whole weekend, to keep ourselves healthy and to help our neighbors and our friends, what a witness to your community if through your garden you can be sharing produce with your community members, especially if they are in a hard place. What if they don't have a garden and all of a sudden a storm comes that knocks down the food system in America, and you are the person in your community that has a large garden with enough vegetables to be able to share with your friends? What a powerful, powerful witnessing opportunity and a light that you can be in your community. So once again, I would encourage you. We see the birth pains of this world getting stronger, getting harder. There's no better time. Place your hands in the soil. Let God be your gardener by your side. Take some of the tools and the trainings that we talked about here and build a garden for this fall, for this year. Start now. Don't wait. And may God bless you as you seek to follow His will, follow His guiding in your own personal life, and as you grow your own food. Thank you so much. It's been a real privilege to be able to share with you. Why don't we close together in a word of prayer? Heavenly Father, thank you for your Spirit. Thank you for being with us as we talk about this subject of growing your own food. And once again, just reminded that you placed man in a garden at the very beginning of time. And what a beautiful place to learn about you, to realize that we grow food not just for our own satisfaction, for our own benefit, but to be able to be a blessing to others and to learn through nature about who you are and about your character, about what it means to love, about what it means to care for life. Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come together to talk about health, to talk about food, and pray that you would continue to inspire each one of us personally. Convict us of the steps that you want us to take during this time. And most of all, please prepare us for your soon coming. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Paul, thank you so much for that powerful presentation. I'm inspired to start gardening more than our family already is. And I hope all of you are inspired to start gardening today.